F-16s have appeared in the skies over Ukraine, where we have more details now about their armaments, the details of the numbers that Ukraine has deployed, and how many will likely come to Ukraine until the end of the year. We'll talk about this as well as about the developments along the front line, where, especially in the Pokrovsk direction, Russia is redeploying all the reserves they can muster to force a breakthrough to probably achieve a way back to the maneuver warfare period of the first few weeks of the war. But we'll talk about this as well as about the other developments along the front line, about political changes, and so much more in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Ukraine continues its strike against targets in the rear of the Russian area. There have been additional strikes against oil depots. Once again, this one shows the fire, the smoke of a fire in Rostov. The voices that took the video are talking about drones that hit there as well. There's also been an ATACMS strike on Luhansk. The head of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic is saying that 12 missiles were used, probably 8 ATACMS and 4 Storm Shadow missiles. He's saying that 4 of those have been taken down and did damage on the ground, whereas the rest obviously has hit. He says that that fuel tanks as well as storage facilities have been hit. Ukraine says they struck a weapon, an installation that is repairing weapon systems and where they are stored as well. We have no further details about the actual damage. There's a video now from the airfield of Morozovsk that was attacked in the past week. There, the report was that an ammunition facility was completely destroyed, as we can see in the background here. And the report was that the Russians were storing glide bombs there. So apparently Ukraine managed to take out a lot of glide bombs on the ground in this attack. The Ukrainians are also reporting additional attacks by the Russians. They are reporting drone attacks, cruise missile attacks, Iskander attacks, and S-300 that were launched from the Donetsk region. S-300 is out of the ordinary because while it is originally a surface-to-air missile, it can be used as a more or less inaccurate surface-to-surface missile. Russians have done it for close to 2 years now, but lately there were no more reports about the usage of S-300, so apparently the Russians have restarted usage of them. Also, after a couple of months, there was another report about the usage of a North Korean ballistic missile, the KN-23, but this report is dating back to the 31st of July when the Russians were using it. On the northern front, we have no change in territory, but Slatkov and Wargonzo, 2 Russian mill bloggers, are talking about Ukrainian reinforcements that are arriving there. So according to them, the Ukrainians sent additional resources in the north, and right now they are also conducting counterattacks according to the Russian mill bloggers, and the Ukrainians are rotating their forces. That's why the reinforcements are coming there as well. But I cannot see any change in territory, and I do not see any serious claims in this regard either. On the eastern front, we have a minor change in territory, and this is from Makivka. Here, the Russians have taken a foothold in the center of the town, so they are basically at this point here now, they have reached and probably control this now, but this is unclear. So a really minor change inside of the town of Makivka itself. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have some changes again. Now, since the last situation report on Saturday, I cannot see any change in the area, either Siversk direction or in Chasiv Yar. We have the Ukrainians confirming that they lost complete control over the whole eastern part. There are some claims that Ukrainians withdrew, but I have not seen Ukrainian forces recently in this area. The Ukrainians claim that they withdrew and that this is more or less the front line here now, where the canal is underground and east where the canal is. The Ukrainians claim that they managed to push the Russians back from the northeastern part of that district of Chasiv Yar, where recently in the last situation report we had the Russians roughly here inside of the first houses. I have not seen any visual evidence, so it's possible that it's true that there are no more Russians there. It's also possible that the Russians are still in there. Unfortunately, I do not have better details. If we go down south in the Toretsk direction, there we do have some changes and some that are somewhat worrisome for the Ukrainians. First, we have an advance in Drushba, which is which is here at this point. So the Russians managed to cross over this whole direction. Here we had them recently at this point and roughly at this, so they managed 2 more streets towards the northwest. But Pivnichne is where it's really troublesome for the Ukrainians right now. We have them first. We have them in the center, fairly much in the center already. Now this is here. This is up here. Then we have them. Here in the southeast are suddenly Ukrainians. Now, if we mark this on the map here, they are roughly here. Here are Ukrainians again. But the latest reports are also saying that the Russians are in the northeast. Here at this point, this is roughly here. We also had the Russians here, and we have them up here. We had them here as well in the recent reports. So we know the Russians are at least operating in this regard here. Why there are Ukrainians here is unclear. Now, this could mean that the front line is not fully solidified yet, that there are gaps in between where troops can move through, that some counterattacks happen, that the Ukrainians withdrew. Then it could be possible that the video that shows a drone attack on the Ukrainian soldiers at this position here is some days old, or it might mean Ukrainians are being cut off here, have been cut off, and are far behind the front line now. As of now, I simply can't say, but as we can see, they are up to 1.5 kilometers behind the Russian reports at the same time. There again, it's probably worth checking the map, even though it's not high resolution. This is the Russians showing their recent advances here on the maps, indicating that even according to the pro-Russian geolocation Telegram channel that I'm using here, this area is not under their full control. So it's possible that this is still, despite deep state maps coloring of red, that this is still some kind of gray zone where both sides are operating in without a solid foothold. But then again, in the end, we can just look in the future and try to see whether they have been cut off here, whether something comes out of it. But at least there's a possibility that a smaller Ukrainian unit might be cut off at this point here now. This is especially important as this was, for instance, a day before. So before the Ukrainians were up here, the Russians were already here and here. Yeah, I can't really say more except that this is weird and could indicate Ukrainians being cut off. The good thing is I have no fresh changes that I can report in this direction. So while the Russians have lately been here at this point, the Ukrainians in the eastern part here are not yet cut off, at least at this point, which is obviously good news in this direction. Further west in the Avdiivka, in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are keeping their advance, and quite significantly, we have to say so. In the Ivanivka direction, they gained significant ground here. Roughly this area was freshly occupied by the Russians. The heads of their attacks have reached the town of Ivanivka as well, and in the Shelane direction, they managed to both straighten out advances in these directions. They managed to gain more here. They managed to advance further in this direction as well, and are in the northeastern part of Shelene. They are at the outskirts of the town, and they managed to advance somewhat into Shelene as well at this point here as well. So the situation there is remaining critical. The Russians are basically daily gaining additional ground in these positions. Then we go further south, and here I have no more change until we are at Krasnohorivka. Here we have the Russians a little bit further north now. Now, Krasnohorivka is basically fallen. We talked about this in the past. Now we have the Russians further north still. They are now here. As of what I see, there is definitely no more permanent position south of the river here. of the Ukrainian side. Whether the Ukrainians are still infiltrating in there in smaller counterattacks or not is unclear, but the main area of Krasnohorivka is under Russian control as of now. Also in the south, the Russians managed to advance close to Konstantinivka. Here they advanced in the houses a little bit towards the west. We have that here in the latest geolocation inside of Konstantinivka. They were still here, so they managed to advance from here to roughly here. So in the southern part of the town, they are now having a presence. Whether it's permanent is still unclear, but we see that they slowly push into the town over the last couple of days. Further south, no changes until we are reaching the oblast border between Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia in the area south of Velika Novosilka, one of the main thrusts of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The Russians have now advanced north of Urushaine itself. We see the northernmost houses, and the Russians are now roughly at this point here. And they also advanced to the east, have reached this point, which is more or less here. So we see the Russians are continue their advance from Urushaine to the north and to the east as well. In the Orekhiv area, there we have actually a significant change. We have a Russian advance in the northern direction, and this is being geolocated at this point here. Now this is fairly easy to identify on the map. This is this part here, and the Russians are now at this point. So they managed to advance roughly 2 kilometers since the last geolocations from their main positions, or from the other direction. They have recently roughly been here 3 kilometers in this direction. So where exactly the front line is right now is unclear, but it seems that at least this whole area should more or less be under Russian influence now, should at the very least be in the gray zone and the contested area. So the Russians are having significant successes in the south here, and let's not forget they recently have been spotted here as well as here. So this whole area is probably also conquered by the Russians over the past few days, as well as the front line is probably roughly here as well. These are the advances where we have geolocations which are not yet reflected here on the pro-Ukrainian deep state map. Further west, I have no change in the direction of the Dnipro, so we switch over right to the Crimean Peninsula, and there Ukraine is saying that on the 2nd of August they didn't just hit the Rostov-on-Don, the submarine, but also they managed to strike 4 S-400 TELs, so launching vehicles, transporter erector launcher. That's the abbreviation, the meaning of the abbreviation. Satellite pictures are supposedly proving this. Now this is claiming that there were 4 of the TL and the radar, and the video shows the radar. The degree of damage is not established. 1 presumably damaged TL and 1 presumably destroyed, whereas 2 are missing. Here is the video. This was where they were before. I honestly can't identify too much on it, so you see the picture now in front of you. Tell me if you see something or not, but it seems that there was definitely hit close by. How significant the damage is, I at least cannot see from those pictures. We also have the Ukrainian spokesperson for the Navy that also claims the S-500 system there was destroyed. I have no proof of this, whether they even hit it, and we have voices that from the Russian sphere that the Rostov-on-Don has not sunk, but it was only damaged again. And here again we have claim. This is from the Ukrainian military itself. This is a high-resolution satellite picture that supposedly should show that the Rostov-on-Don was destroyed or was sunk. This is, as you can see, camouflage netting over it, where it clearly shows that something has changed, that a damage was done. But whether the submarine was sunk or not, I at least cannot confirm from this picture here. I cannot see one. This, on the other hand, could be the outline of a submarine that's still afloat. But as said, unfortunately, I can't say much just because I have these pictures. Then we go back to the overall situation, and here we have the report that the Russians take all their reserves in the Pokrovsk direction. That's the 59th Brigade is saying this, meaning the Russians put their focus now in their attempt to reach Pokrovsk here. As we've seen in the past few weeks that the Russians had since they managed to break through at Ocheretine, since a rotation of the Ukrainians failed there and allowed the Russians to enter this strong point that was supposed to hold them quite a lot, the Russians managed to gain more or less that whole area here, where as they had penetrated the main Ukrainian defensive line in this direction. Now they're advancing almost every day in basically all directions, lately mostly in the direction along the railroad line here. And should they cut the road here, this will obviously cut the main line of communication between Chasiv Yar, Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk, supplying the whole front line here. It will not mean that the Ukrainians will be cut off somewhere, but it's going to worsen their position and make it more difficult. With the Ukrainians now saying the Russians sent every reinforcement there, we clearly see that Russia wants to force a breakthrough. They probably have the hope that they can return to a maneuver warfare again and thus force a decisive change, especially before the US election has shown its effect. But at the same time, the drone problematic for the Russians has not been solved, so this seems to be unlikely. The Ukrainians still know of every troop concentration the Russians are building up before it even reaches the front line, and as of right now, the shell hunger is nowhere close to how it has been half a year ago. The Ukrainians have the means to blunt Russian attacks, to at least hinder them, to make them slower and to reduce the gains. This means that the Russians will have trouble doing big mechanized attacks and successful big mechanized attacks. This will mean that they will continue their focus on infantry, which can obviously make successes and can continuously make successes, at least in this very moment, but a breakthrough, a massive change, a change of the front line of 30 kilometers per day or something like this seems completely impossible, at least in the current context as of now. So a complete breakthrough of the front line there seems to still be unlikely. Then we have a video, for instance, showing the Ukrainians, a Ukrainian F-16 over Odessa. We see it here. It was geolocated, as you can see, fairly easy to identify. And what we can see is that it has 2 extra fuel tanks. Let me see if I can have the picture here. Those things, in case you can see them, are extra fuel tanks. It has missiles at the wingtips. These can be AIM-9 Sidewinder, or they can be AIM-120 MRAM. The Ukrainians in other pictures they published showed themselves carrying the MRAM here, so it was likely an MRAM. The pictures the Ukrainians have published were also carrying AIM-120B MRAM, so a fairly early, a fairly obsolete version of it. But as of now, we are not really expecting the Ukrainians to engage in air-to-air combat just yet, and an analyst claimed that this is an inert, a training missile that was displayed in this moment, so it's not necessarily meaning that the Ukrainians are actually arming the AIM-120Bs on their F-16s as of right now, while they would probably be perfectly sufficient against cruise missiles if this is the aim of if this is the target of their missions. But then again, this was an expert by all means from what I see. I myself was not able to confirm that those were inert missiles, so I or we either have to trust his assessment or not. It seems to be likely, though, that Ukraine will receive AIM-120C8 that have a significantly bigger range, but their radar system is not even up for that mission, so they won't be able to use the full range of those missiles. We'll have to see how it continues. Then we have something from the political area. Mali is cutting diplomatic ties to Ukraine because it's accusing Ukraine to have helped the Tuareg in the ambush against the forces in northern Mali, where a bigger number of Russian Wagner mercenaries as well as government troops from Mali were killed in this attack. The Ukrainians, as we talked in the past, basically confirmed that their special forces are operating in Mali, so this is now the consequences. And then CNN is reporting that Russia planned to send missiles and military equipment of undetermined type to the Houthis in July. But political pressure from Saudi Arabia and the United States have stopped this. At the same time, though, several cargo planes were spotted over the last few days flying to Tehran from Russia, while the escalation with the relationship with Israel are boiling up right now. The rumors are spreading everywhere that the Iranian attack on Israel is about to come and is supposedly going to be much, much bigger. But I said this is mostly rumors right now. I might do a video about this and in the near future on this channel. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But as of now, it's unclear when a Iranian strike will come, even though it's likely. So we have Russian transport planes flying to Tehran. Obviously, it's not known, and it's. I do not find any details whether those transport planes were empty or whether they brought something. And at the same time, we don't know with what they were flying back, when they are flying back. So they might have come empty and taking away Iranian weapons for Russia. They might have done the opposite, or they might have even done both, supplying Iran with some systems while taking, for instance, drones back to Russia. Unfortunately, unclear as of now. But at the same time, Shoigu is now in Iran. He's the head of the Security Council now, and a head of a state defense company is accompanying him. So at this time, the Russians are still in Iran and having talks with the Iranian government in military matters. But that was it from me for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment in the comment section about the things we have discussed, and if you would like to see more about, for instance, Israel and the Middle East. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. But that's it from me for now. If you want to support this channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.